Chemistry of life summary. Atomic structure. All atoms are constructed from these three subatomic particles. Protons and neutrons are about the same mass as each other. You can see that relative mass here. And are nearly 2,000 times heavier than an electron, which you can see the relative mass here. The proton has a positive charge, equal in magnitude to the negative charge of an electron. And neutrons have no charge. They are neutral. The protons and neutrons are in the nucleus and are called nucleons. The nucleus is 100,000 times smaller than the atom, but almost all of the mass of the atom is in the nucleus. The electrons move outside the nucleus in the mostly empty space of the atom. They move so rapidly that their location is never certain, so they are called an electron cloud. Organic and inorganic molecules. Organic molecules are the molecules that make living things. They are made mostly of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, and frequently sulfur and phosphorus. They can be built by living things and non-living things. Organic molecules are generally large and always contain carbon. Inorganic molecules can participate in the metabolism of living things, but they do not build living things. Inorganic molecules, on the other hand, are very small and generally do not contain carbon. Inorganic molecules include water, ammonia, and carbon dioxide. Even though CO2 has carbon, it is still considered inorganic. Carbon is special. Carbon atoms can have 4 covalent bonds. Carbon can bond together to form long, branching chains, allowing organic molecules to become large. Large organic molecules often have carbon-containing backbones, also called skeletons. Large organic molecules are also called polymers. They are built by connecting smaller molecules called monomers. Hydrocarbons. These molecules consist of only carbon and hydrogen atoms. Each carbon atom makes 4 bonds. Each hydrogen atom makes 1 bond. Carbon-hydrogen bonds are non-polar. The non-polar bonds have a major impact on hydrocarbon behavior. Water is polar, so it will attract other polar molecules. Since hydrocarbons are not polar, they will not be attracted to water and will not mix or dissolve in water. They are hydrophobic. Fossil fuels are examples of hydrocarbons that are formed from decaying organic matter. Saturated and unsaturated hydrocarbons. In saturated hydrocarbons, every carbon atom is bonded to 4 different atoms. No new atoms can be added along the chain. In unsaturated hydrocarbons, some of the carbon-carbon bonds are double or triple bonds, as you see here, this double bond, that can be broken and replaced with a single bond where additional atoms are added. The result of this carbon-carbon double bond is to create a kink on the hydrocarbon chain, as you see here. Macromolecules. There are 4 categories of organic molecules, also known as macromolecules. All are built on a hydrocarbon backbone, but only the first 3, proteins, carbohydrates, and nucleic acids, are polymers. Proteins are made from monomers of amino acids, carbohydrates are made from monosaccharides, and nucleic acids are made from nucleotides. The 4th macromolecule is lipids. Proteins. Proteins consist of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and sometimes sulfur, and carry out the work in organisms. They are the machines, enzymes and transporters, and form important body structures. They are also called peptides and polypeptides. Proteins are chains of amino acids. There are 20 amino acids used to construct the vast majority of proteins. All life on Earth uses virtually the same set of amino acids to construct proteins. Amino acids are bonded to neighboring amino acids with peptide bonds. Shape is critical to the function of a protein. A protein's shape depends on 4 levels of structure: primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. Components of amino acids. Amino acids include an amino group, in purple here, NH2, a carboxyl group that you see circled in red here, that's carbon, double bonded to oxygen, and then single bonded to an OH group, and a side chain, or an R group, that you see circled in green here. Each unique side chain, or R group, determines the properties of its amino acid. Carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are compounds consisting of carbon and water, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms. Simple carbohydrates are also called sugars, monosaccharides, which are CX, H2X, OX, or disaccharides, which is 2 monosaccharides bonded. Polysaccharides combine many monosaccharides. Simple sugars are fuel to do work, the raw materials for carbon backbones, and the monomers from which larger carbohydrates are synthesized. Carbohydrate solubility. Sugars all have many polar hydroxyl or OH groups in their structure. That makes them soluble in water. These drawings show the single and double bonds of 2 monosaccharides, but do not show their 3-dimensional forms. So you can see glucose here, which has several 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 OH groups, and fructose here, which has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 OH groups. Nucleic acids. Nucleic acids are large molecules or polymers consisting of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. They store genetic information and instruct the cell in creating proteins. There are 2 types of nucleic acids: deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA, and ribonucleic acid, RNA. The 3 main types of RNA are messenger RNA, mRNA, transfer RNA, tRNA, and ribosomal RNA, rRNA. Nucleotides. Nucleic acids are composed of chains of nucleotides, monomers. Nucleotides are made up of a sugar, which you can see shaded here, a nitrogenous base, shaded here, and a phosphate. Phosphodiester bonds connect nucleotides and are formed by dehydration synthesis reactions. Lipids. Lipids are the one class of large biological molecules that do not consist of polymers. Sugars, nucleic acids, and amino acids are all polymers. The main functions of lipids include energy storage, the major component of cell membranes, and various metabolic activities. Types of lipids. Lipids are either hydrophobic or amphiphilic. Amphiphilic molecules have a hydrophobic tail and a hydrophilic head, which you can see here. So the hydrophilic end is attracted to water, and the hydrophobic end is not. Phospholipids, like those that make our cell membrane bilayers, are amphiphilic. Fats and oils are hydrophobic lipids and will not mix with water. Triglycerides, hydrophobic lipids. Triglycerides are common fat storage molecules in our body. They are hydrophobic. They are constructed from two types of smaller molecules, a single glycerol, which you see right here, and 3 of these fatty acids. Fatty acids are carboxylic acids with a very long chain of carbon atoms. They vary in length and the number and locations of double bonds they contain. Phospholipids, amphiphilic lipids. Phospholipids have 2 fatty acids and 1 phosphate group. The phosphate end is polar and hydrogen bonds with water. The fatty acids are made of long chains of carbon and hydrogen, making them nonpolar. The phosphate end is hydrophilic and the fatty acid end is hydrophobic, making phospholipids amphiphilic. Cell membranes are made up of phospholipids held together by hydrophobic-hydrophilic interactions. The interior and exterior of a cell are both aqueous, so the polar heads orient toward the interior and exterior. The long hydrophobic tails orient toward one another, away from the water, forming a nonpolar hydrophobic layer, the interior of the membrane. Saturated and unsaturated lipids. Saturated lipids have the maximum number of hydrogen atoms possible. They have no double bonds in their carbon chain and are solid at room temperature. Unsaturated lipids have 1 or more double bonds. They are liquids at room temperature, and when hydrogenated or when hydrogen is added, they become solid and saturated. Chemical bonding. There are 3 major types of bonds. First, covalent. It's where electrons are shared between the atoms to form molecules with a fixed number of atoms. There are 2 types of covalent compounds. Covalent networks are larger compounds consisting of repeating elemental or molecular units, all covalently bonded together, such as diamond or quartz. Molecules are smaller compounds of 1 or more elements bonded together, such as water or oxygen gas. Ionic bonds are bonds that form between a positive and a negative ion. Ionic bonds do not form molecules. They create an ionic compound with a specific ratio of ions, but not a fixed number of ions. A formula unit is the ratio of the atoms in lowest terms. Metallic bonds form between large numbers of metal atoms. Electrons are shared between large numbers of atoms, creating a sea of electrons that move freely between the atoms. There are 3 types of intermolecular forces, IMFs, also known as van der Waals forces, that bring molecules together: dipole-dipole interactions, hydrogen bonding, and London dispersion forces, or LDFs. There is a 4th intermolecular force between ions and molecules. Those are ion-dipole interactions. They're not considered a van der Waals force, and they mainly occur in solution phases. Dipole-dipole interactions. Molecules that have permanent dipoles are attracted to each other. The positive end of one is attracted to the negative end of the other, and vice versa. These forces are only important when the molecules are close to each other. Only polar molecules will have this type of intermolecular force. The more polar the molecule, the stronger the attraction between molecules, the higher the boiling point, and the higher the melting point. You can see from the image the interaction between any 2 like charges is repulsive, so these 2 ends are repelling, and the interaction between any 2 opposite charges, the red and blue ends, is attractive. Hydrogen bonding. The dipole-dipole interactions experienced when hydrogen is bonded to nitrogen, oxygen, or fluorine are unusually strong. They're known as hydrogen bonds. Hydrogen bonding arises in part from the high electronegativity and small radius of nitrogen, oxygen, and fluorine. When hydrogen is bonded to one of those very electronegative elements, the positive hydrogen nucleus is exposed, creating a very strong dipole. And you can see from these dashed lines the formation of hydrogen bonds between molecules. London dispersion forces. London dispersion forces occur between all molecules. They result from the fact that electrons are in constant motion and sometimes are on the same side of the molecule. When the electrons are on one side, the molecule is polarized. One side is negative and the other is positive. This is an instantaneous dipole. The polarization creates an electric field that oppositely polarizes nearby molecules. An induced dipole is resulted, and this leads to an attraction between the nearby molecules. Polarizability. London dispersion forces are present in all molecules, whether they are polar or nonpolar. The tendency of an electron cloud to distort in this way is called polarizability. Because larger molecules have more electrons, they are more polarizable. Molecules with more electrons experience stronger London dispersion forces. The greater the number of electrons, the more polarizable the particles are, resulting in stronger London dispersion forces. Ion-dipole interactions. There is a fourth intermolecular force between ions and molecules that will be important as we explore solutions later in the course. Ion-dipole interactions are not considered a van der Waals force. The ion-dipole forces cause ionic substances to dissolve in polar solvents. Summarizing intermolecular forces. So first ask, are ions involved? If yes, are polar molecules and ions both present? If not, we're talking about ionic bonding. If yes, we're talking about ion-dipole forces. If there are no ions involved, then C, are there polar molecules involved? If no, then we're only discussing London dispersion forces. If yes, ask, are there hydrogen atoms bonded to nitrogen, oxygen, or fluorine? If no, we just have dipole-dipole forces. If yes, we have hydrogen bonding. In all cases, all covalent compounds, whether polar or nonpolar, exhibit van der Waals forces. Molecular structure. Molecules are formed by covalent bonds, and the atoms that participate are held together by covalent bonds. Hydrogen molecule. Each hydrogen atom has one electron. The atom by itself is not stable. It wants to have two electrons. It joins with another hydrogen atom, and they share the two electrons, forming a single covalent bond. The molecule still has two separate atoms with two separate nuclei. The drawing shows the chemical bond as the two shared electrons here. Oxygen molecule. Each atom has 6 valence electrons. You can see the 6 in green in this outer shell and the 6 in purple in this outer shell. It needs to have 8 electrons in its valence shell to be stable. It joins with another oxygen atom, and they each share 2 of their electrons, forming a double bond, which you see here, 1, 2, to get a stable configuration of 8 valence electrons. The molecule still has 2 separate atoms with 2 separate nuclei. Water molecule. 2 hydrogen atoms bond with 1 oxygen atom. Each hydrogen shares its electron with oxygen, and oxygen shares one of its electrons with each hydrogen atom. The hydrogen atoms now have 2 valence electrons each, and the oxygen has 8 valence electrons. This is a stable configuration. The oxygen atoms have more protons than the hydrogen atoms, so the hydrogen electrons are pulled closer to the oxygen atom due to the stronger electric force. The molecule is neutral overall, but the oxygen side is slightly negatively charged, and the hydrogen side is slightly positively charged. Water is a polar molecule because of the uneven distribution of charge, resulting in special properties. Water properties. Water moderates the temperatures of its surroundings due to its high specific heat. It takes a lot of energy to change the temperature of water. Water dissolves most substances because of its polarity. It attracts other water molecules, is cohesive, and is attracted to other molecules. It is adhesive, also because of its polarity. It provides a medium for almost all biological chemical reactions. The intermolecular forces between water molecules are hydrogen bonds. Passive transport. Passive transport, the movement of molecules, ions, solutes, and water through a cell membrane without the input of free energy. It occurs when the concentration of a substance is greater on one side of the membrane than the other. The particles move with the concentration gradient. Diffusion, the random movement of particles in a gas or liquid from an area of high concentration to low concentration. Osmosis, the net diffusion or flow of water molecules through a semi-permeable membrane into an area of higher solute concentration. Facilitated diffusion, similar to diffusion, but require the help of an integral protein in the membrane. And thermosynthesis, biological reactions that would normally not take place can use the free energy in a temperature gradient to occur. The 4 laws of thermodynamics. 0th law defines temperature and how to measure it. Temperature is a property of objects such that when objects are placed in thermal contact with one another, heat will flow between them until the temperature of each is the same. Objects from which heat flows are at a higher temperature than objects into which heat flows. First law is a statement of the conservation of energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. The energy of the universe is constant. Although the energy of the universe is constant, it can be converted to different forms: chemical, gravitational, kinetic, electromagnetic, and nuclear. The second and third laws deal with entropy, S. Entropy can be defined in 3 equivalent ways: as a measure of the number of energetically equivalent ways a system can be arranged, as a measure of disorder in a system, as a measure of the degree to which energy has been dispersed and is unable to do work. Second law, for any reversible process, the change in the entropy of the universe is 0. Delta S equals 0. For any irreversible process, the entropy of the universe increases, or the change in entropy is greater than 0. Spontaneous processes are irreversible, so the change in entropy is greater than 0. The third law establishes a 0 value for entropy that corresponds to the entropy of a perfect crystal at absolute 0, 0 Kelvin. Anabolic and catabolic reactions. Living things obtain and use energy. Trees take in sunlight and animals take in food. Both use the energy to grow and reproduce. All chemical reactions in an organism either obtain or use energy. This is known as metabolism. A metabolic pathway begins with one or more specific molecules and ends with one or more products. Each step is catalyzed by a specific enzyme. Without enzymes, these pathways would not occur or take millions of years instead of seconds. There are two types of metabolic pathways. Anabolic pathways combine building blocks to build big molecules. Catabolic pathways break down big molecules into their smaller building blocks. Anabolic pathways require an input of energy. They are not spontaneous. They have products that are more complex than their reactants and decrease the entropy of life. They increase the entropy of life's surroundings, so the total entropy in the universe increases. Photosynthesis is an anabolic process. It is not spontaneous. It requires the energy from sunlight. There are fewer resulting particles, so the entropy of light decreases. This is offset by an even greater increase of entropy of the environment, so the entropy of the universe increases. Dehydration synthesis. Polymers are formed through a process called dehydration synthesis, an anabolic reaction. Two monomers combine, a water molecule is removed, and a new molecule, a polymer, is created. Catabolic pathways release energy, have products that are less complex than their reactants, increase the entropy of life, and increase the entropy of life's environment. Cellular respiration is a catabolic process as it breaks down glucose to release energy. The number of particles increases, so the entropy of life increases. The entropy of the environment also increases, so the entropy of the universe increases. Hydrolysis is the opposite of the dehydration synthesis process that we talked about previously and that you see on the screen here. New molecules can be formed by breaking existing molecules apart. So if we take this water and we break it apart this way, we form two new molecules. The breaking apart process is hydrolysis, a catabolic reaction. A water molecule is added to a molecule, so we take this water and we add it to this molecule here to break this bond. And it causes the split here to form the two new molecules. The H and the OH groups from the water are now a part of each molecule in the product. Oxidation and reduction. Redox reactions involve the transfer of electrons from one species to another. The substance that gains electrons is to be said to be reduced, while the substance that loses electrons is said to be oxidized. In this reaction that you see, the copper atom loses an electron to the silver ion. Copper was oxidized and the silver ion was reduced. Oxidation and reduction summary here. Oxidation is a loss of electrons, and a reduction is a gain of electrons. In oxidation, the oxidation state increases. In reduction, it decreases. In oxidation, the electrons are the product because we're losing them. And in reduction, they're a reactant because we're gaining them. This can be remembered by the expression Leo, the lion, says grr. Leo being loss of electrons is oxidation. Grr being gain of electrons is reduction.